Thank you, Ruth. Good afternoon, everyone. Magandang hapon po. Mukhang nakangiti pa naman lahat. So, I think in good spirits pa tayong lahat. So, the title of my presentation, so I veered away from what was originally suggested as the title, as the presentation, which is, sorry Ruth but very boring title of Ensuring Affordability. So I thought let's challenge everyone a bit. And really address the issue head-on. And the title is inspired by a recent meeting with the President, with the Private Sector Advisory Council, PSAC, where they presented this circular, like sort of a, how do you call it? A loop, where we're caught in a loop, they said. That we have shortage, then there is increase in rates, then there's regulatory intervention, then projects do not get realized, which leads us back to shortage. And it's somehow, of course, the message that they wanted to impart to us, it's the regulatory intervention that's causing this loop. But so I thought I'd pick it up and call it for what it is, which is a catch-22 situation. And how do we navigate this catch-22 situation in the context of the Philippines, in the context of an energy trilemma? So, sorry po, I'm a little bit nervous because I'm having flashbacks of law school kasi si Justice nandyan. But, so, please pardon me. But this catch-22 situation is something that's not unique to us. So it's something that's being experienced. So it's something that's experienced in other parts of the world. Because this, what we call energy transition, is happening all over. And if we're going to talk about the future of Philippine energy sector, I think we need to put it in better context, in the proper context, by realizing that the future will just be more energy demanding. Because what we want is progress, right? And that progress, unless we are wise to incorporate energy efficiency at the outset, will be more energy demanding. And according to Dr. Angela Wilkinson of the World Energy Council, the future, she said, of energy is going to be more demanding. COVID has reminded us that policy agendas, like human ambitions, are intertwined. And in energy's case, it all connects, all the agendas connect. That's how central you all are, we all are, in solving this, in getting out of this catch-22 situation. There are terms being used like race to zero or net zero targets. But according to her, and I agree, that's why I picked up this quote, energy does not lend itself to single-issue thinking, and our societies need us to join or connect the dots. So how I wish that, it's as simple as breaking the loop and everything will be all right, or cutting the loop and everything will be all right. According to world standards, power systems are judged according to what's called the energy trilemma, where there should be a good balance of energy security, energy equity, and environmental sustainability. Being ranked worldwide or having a good grade, again, law school, having a good grade is a nice thing to have, but when, in real life, what is important is it producing the progress that we want? Is it being felt by our people? Is it being felt by the public? So I think a better framework for understanding, I think what suits us as a developing country is one that is proposed many years ago by other academics. I used this when I used to teach in the Ateneo School of Government. I use this framework because I think the three legs of the trilemma, energy security, energy equity, and environmental sustainability, in the Philippine context, are all encompassed by this notion of energy security, by the goal of energy security. Energy affordability for us will not mean anything or we will not be able to achieve energy affordability if we do not meet the goal of energy security. And neither can we call our system secure if it is not sustainable. So it's all the different facets of energy security. And in this framework of Savakul and Brown, nagiging academic na po ako ulit. In the framework of Savakul and Brown, they have identified these 4 parameters of energy security, which, as you can see, already covers availability, affordability, economic efficiency, and environmental stewardship. What's better, and that's why I like this framework a lot more, is that it already includes the measures or the indicators. Because what they say is that, right, if it's something you cannot measure, it's something that you cannot improve. So we should be able to measure ourselves so that we know whether we're moving closer to our targets. Where does the regulator play in all of this? I guess you're all familiar, or many of you are familiar with us at the Energy Regulatory Commission anyway, so I won't dwell on this one a lot. But what I wanted to include here are our 5 fundamental mandates. With the passage of the EPIRA and the creation of the Energy Regulatory Commission, there's a long list of mandates or authorities under Section 43 of EPIRA. So it's going to be too long if we go through all of that. But I've summarized it into 5. And first is to promote market competition. Second, ensure consumer choice. Third, protect consumer interest. Fourth, which is related to the third, ensure least cost in electricity pricing. And finally, but definitely not the least, is to penalize abuse of market power. This sums up the authority of the Commission over what we call now the 2-part power industry, which has the competitive sector and the regulated sector. Again, I won't go through everything because I trust that this group of wise people are all very familiar with it. Yusek Gev presented this in a different format. But this is a snapshot of where the industry is at the moment. We've updated this to June 2024, so for some who might have seen a different version of this, you might notice the numbers are different. This is the most updated. Just to focus on a portion of this, it shows that we currently have 235 generation companies. When EPIRA was passed in 2001, there were only maybe not even 10 generation companies, unless you count all the IPPs of National Power Corporation who were just serving National Power Corporation. So there was Napocor, there were the 3 IPPs of Meralco, and then just small local suppliers, if you may, or local generation companies. But today, 20 plus years after EPIRA, we have, at least on paper, 235 generation companies. I highlight that because I'll come back to that later. But we still have one transmission concessionaire, which is a regulated entity. The distribution utilities is another story altogether. They're regulated, but we currently have 141 distribution utilities. That includes the private utilities and all our 121 electric cooperatives in the country. The newbies, or the new people in the game, would be our retail electricity suppliers. This new sector that was introduced by EPIRA, we currently have 123 of them. And of course, all the participants in the WESM that are trading every 5 minutes of the day. So that's how active and dynamic the sector has been. But again, this did not happen overnight. And even the term energy transition is not something that has just come upon us yesterday or even 10 years ago. The Philippines, and I'm glad that former secretary is here. The Philippine power industry, or the Philippine energy, the history of the Philippine energy sector has gone through several transitions over the decades. And this is it's a busy slide because I tried to fit everything in one slide. But if we had more time, we would have gone through each transition in greater detail. But what I wanted to show here is that When the Philippine energy sector, power sector in particular, was formed with the establishment of the National Power Corporation in 1936, the main mandate of NPC was to power the Philippines with hydropower resources only. That was its mandate, hydropower. For several decades, all the way to 1976, that mandate was amended to incorporate geothermal. So hydro plus geo. So for several decades, we were actually 100% renewables. So the first shift was from renewables to incorporate more fossil fuels and nuclear, actually. So I was reading, I chanced upon in my stack, the book of former minister also, Jeronimo Velasco, and he was talking about the first energy independence agenda that was, or roadmap, energy independence roadmap that was crafted in the early 1970s that incorporated the entry of coal and nuclear. Nuclear was supposed to be the base load. But of course, we all know that that did not materialize, and hence we went to the second transition. The second transition is not a fuel transition. It was an ownership transition from a fully state-owned industry to a private sector-driven industry. So that's our second transition in our history. The third transition was sometime, actually that's not correct, it's not 2001, but 2008, when the RE Act was passed, where as a state, as a people, we decided we will increase renewables again. Because at that time, in 2008, the share of renewables was down to 35%. So the goal of the Renewable Energy Act in 2008 was to increase. So it's a shift back to green, going back to the roots of the Philippine power system. But we're still at it today. But today, we're currently not just in the third transition phase, we're already in what I call the fourth transition, which is the multi-dimensional transition. Where we are not just transitioning to increase renewables in our mix, we are also at the same time moving from a highly centralized to a decentralized power system, which is not something that's, I think, driven mainly by policy, but by availability of technology. Can you stop people from putting up solar panels even if there's no policy for it, if it makes sense for them? So that's why for me it's better to regulate than ignore that it exists, right? But that's the second parallel shift or transition that's happening from a centralized to a decentralized system. But there's a third shift that was born out of EPIRA, which is the shift or migration of customers from being captive customers, not having the power to choose their supplier, to being contestable customers, exercising that freedom to choose their own supplier. So all those three shifts are happening in parallel as we sit or stand, as we stand today. But there is something that has been constant amid these transitions. And that's the fact that energy security and energy affordability remain elusive. Imagine, almost 100 years into this Philippine energy history, and those two goals have remained elusive. So I thought it's a better framework for our discussion, knowing the wisdom that's in this room, or anticipating the wisdom that's in this room, for us to tackle this issue head on. Why has it remained elusive to this day? And I'll focus on just three sectors for today because of time constraints. So what I have identified are certain catch-22 situations in the generation sector, in the transmission sector, and distribution sector. EPIRA had set out very lofty objectives for all these sectors, for the power industry in general. As I said, pursue energy security or ensure energy security, ensure energy affordability. In the generation sector, the road to this goal was supposedly in making the sector a competitive one, rather than a monopoly or a vertically integrated government-controlled sector. But today, the generation sector that's supposed to be competitive and market-driven has not really delivered on the affordable rates. So we are yet to see the direct link between competition among the 235, if you remember the number that I shared earlier, the 235 players in the market. We have yet to see that competition generated from 235 players leading to affordable prices. If you recall, in 2022, towards the end of the year, at the ERC, we launched what we call the fuel cost audit, because we received reports that some of our distribution utilities are not even confirming the costs that are being passed on by their suppliers before they charge their consumers. So we launched this audit among all distribution utilities, private distribution utilities and electric cooperatives. In our initial analysis, and please do not, I know some are taking pictures, but this is not yet official. I am relying on Ruth's promise that the Chatham House rules will be observed. This is just preliminary findings. What we have seen is that while electricity rates saw steep hikes when the fuel costs were rising in the global market during the pandemic and all the way to 2022, the country's average generation cost peaked at around 9 pesos per kilowatt hour by the end of 2022 from its pre-pandemic rate of only 5.2 pesos per kilowatt hour. During the same period, the price of Indonesian coal climbed to $330 per metric ton US dollars towards the end of 2022 from just around $67 per metric ton at the onset of the pandemic. Why are we focusing on coal? As I think Yusek Geb had shown earlier, our system is still predominantly powered by coal. And why are we focusing in particular on Indonesian coal? Yesterday at the event that Yusek Geb and I were also present, we're always tandem. Sec Popo was also shared the information that 83% of the coal used in our country is imported, and 98% of that 83% coal imported comes from Indonesia. That's why Indonesian coal is quite relevant here. Generation cost today is reverting to pre-pandemic rates at slower rate than easing global fuel prices. I don't have a pointer here, but you'll see from the graph that while the gray line, the darker gray line, has shown a downward trend, it has diverged from the downward trend of generation rates, which is the blue line. It has diverged from the connection of those two. Okay, so here. So when the when coal prices went up, generation costs went up accordingly. But as coal prices went down, yes, there is a decline, but it doesn't, it was no longer tracking the decline. What does this say? That short-run fluctuations would be represented. Ay, salamat po. Short-run fluctuations are represented by this data. This is a 10-year data, by the way, 2013 to more than 10 years, 2013 to January 2024. Short-run fluctuations in coal price have delayed effect on generation rates, but only in instances of downward adjustments. So nadidelay lang po siya pagpababa. Okay, so this is one issue that we're also trying to not just confirm, validate, but also address, find ways to see how we can address this, particularly because for most of the power supply agreements, fuel prices are just what we call pass-through. And that's why it's critical for distribution utilities to review those documents that substantiate the fuel prices. Unfortunately, and we have released our first decision on this, penalizing one electric cooperative, because when we sent out the order to them to file the fuel supporting documents, they said, wait po, we will ask our generator. That means all this time, they have not been validating the fuel costs. And even with the extension that was given to them by the Commission, they were not able to file the supporting documents. And sadly, they are not alone. There are other electric cooperatives. I must say, this is not common among private utilities, but electric cooperatives that are on the same boat. They don't even have the supporting documents. And most of them are denied by their GenCos when they request for documents, post-billing, denied by their GenCos, and the GenCos reason is those are confidential documents and proprietary. They cannot be given to the utility. So we'll be addressing all those other issues in time. So we're addressing them per utility. But this is one issue where competition has not really made its case, leading up to affordability. The second one, and I know this will be uncomfortable, but it's okay, we're all friends here. The generation sector is competitive, yet it is still highly concentrated. So the 235 companies that you listed, that was listed earlier, if you group them according to ownership, are represented by 5. Only 5 players in the wholesale market. The story is the same in the retail. And these are not, by the way, ito pwedeng hindi Chatham House rules, because we issue this regularly. Okay? The first is on the market share limitation, which the ERC issues every year. The second is to your left, to your right, is the report on the retail market, on the status of the retail suppliers. So it's almost the same entities, same set of entities. So that's why I said earlier, on paper, 235 looks impressive, but in real terms, we have a very or highly concentrated generation sector. What does this all mean for us as a regulator, for example? And with the suggestion that, it's just by taking out regulatory intervention, we will all be in, energy nirvana. But it may not, let's be realistic, it may not really happen. Because even if we take out all the shackles, so to speak, in the generation sector, we will just be left with this common misconception about market economies, that if we just allow it to be unregulated, then we come up with a most efficient form of capitalism. But according to this economist in a 2023 article or study, he said this view comes from the belief that markets are self-regulating and that government intervention as a rule is a disturbo. Disturbs that delicate balance. Well, the appeal of this argument is understandable, according to him. It overlooks important realities about markets and the essential and often hidden role of government regulation. That's in the generation sector. Let me go now to the transmission sector, which is a different story altogether, because there's no debate whether we should regulate it or not. It is a regulated sector. But the reality remains regulated, again, on paper. But the truth is that there has been no reset, no regulation of the rates of NGCP since 2010. So 2010 was the last time that a reset was done. 2009, actually, was the last time that the reset was done by the Commission. And that was good for 5 years because it's a 5-year cycle. That was good until 2015. Ideally, 2 years before the end of that cycle, NGCP should have filed for its own rate reset so that it can be effective by 2016, by the end of the cycle. But since there were no rules, there was no filing, and 2016 to today is 8 years we're still completing. But we started the reset exercise for NGCP in September 2022, and in December 2022, they filed their application for the rate reset. I highlight also September because I assumed the post at ERC on August 8, 2022. Some might think, oh, ang bilis naman, minadali. Some that, in a month, we came out with the rules. Actually, there were draft rules. We just finished it. We just completed it at this time. So we just finished the rules, published the rules, and in 2 months, NGCP filed. And we're in the final process of finally doing a review and reset of NGCP's rates. For distribution, the picture doesn't really depart much from this. It's also delayed. There has been no reset. But there is another element that I want us to, that's true. That's a reality. We do not deny it. But there's also one area that I think we need to appreciate in the distribution sector. And I call it the tale of one giant and hundreds of Lilliputians. Because, and this is from the perspective of the regulator. This is not a judgment or anything, but this is how, this is the dilemma. This is the catch-22 situation of the regulator in the distribution sector. We're supposed to rule without discrimination. We're supposed to apply rules non-discriminatorily in the distribution sector. Yet we also cannot deny that they are not one. They are not similar in size. They are not similar in state of development. They are not similar in governance. So it's very difficult to apply uniform rules to a set of subjects that are not uniform at all. Aside from that, we have a subset that is private, corporations, as most of you come from and are very familiar with, and many, 121, electric cooperatives that are non-stock, non-profit organizations of different, even among that subset, there are sub-subsets because there are large ECs, small ECs, off-grid ECs. So it's really hard to say the least. So let's talk about the elephant in the room. How is the regulator supposed to do its job in the face of all these catch-22 situations and dilemma? I think what is undeniable is that there is an urgent need for reforms. I think there has been a long stage of neglect even, or it has been overlooked, that the regulator's role is quite critical. And it is not, what we have today is not enough. What we do today will not be enough unless we recognize the realities of the regulator. There are organizational reforms, key organizational reforms that we need to have. We need to also revisit our mandates and mindset, I call it, mandates and mindset, the way we do things. There's also the challenge of funding and continuous training for our personnel. This is how we look like today. This is the Energy Regulatory Commission today. We only have 5 services. If you can see, I don't know if everyone can see well the slide. We only have about 300 personnel. That's why if you notice in the Philippine energy sector in numbers, there are about 600 power plants. Even if we were to inspect all 300 personnel, including myself, were to inspect the 600 power plants, I don't know when we will be able to finish all that inspection and still come out with reports to write, right? And do all the other things like regulate the 141 utilities. So it's very challenging. But it's not just a question of numbers. It's also a question of how we are formed. Look at the, I don't know if you see it. Teka po tingnan ko kung gagana. Okay. Power supply agreements, for example, I know a lot of you are familiar with power supply agreements. Power supply agreements are reviewed or go through our regulatory operation service and our legal services because they are documents, contracts by our distribution utility, and they are contracts, so they need to be reviewed by our legal service. How many distribution utilities again? 141. Even if all of them would just have one power supply agreement, that's 141 contracts that will need to be reviewed by one division, the Tariffs and Rates Division, that will wait for the go signal of the director, which is ito po, and then we'll wait for the go signal of the legal director here before they go up to the commission for deliberation. But here's the rub. This same group of tariffs also is the same group that reviewed the reset or any filing that has impact on the rate, which is also legal in nature, so goes through this part as well. They're the same people. And when distribution utilities apply for CAPEX, they also go through CAPEX applications or CAPEX, capital expenditures. They go through the same team and go through, because there are hearings, go through the legal service as well. That's I don't know how many catch-22s there are in that situation. So when you talk about earlier the major challenges on delays and approaches, or delays and approvals for the regulator, this is really the main reason. It's not just we don't have enough people, we are not built to cope with 265 generation companies, 600 power plants, and 141 distribution utilities. We haven't caught up with the times. Fortunately, today, the executive has been very supportive with our beg na po talaga, plea for a reorganized ERC. And they have really been pushing the envelope on what can be done at the executive level. And as you know, the EPIRA amendments have been certified urgent also to Congress so that we can get out of our own catch-22 situation. But aside from organizational, I mentioned earlier, mandates and mindset. In the generation sector, it will ease up the pressure also on the regulator the earlier that we accelerate RCOA, retail competition and open access. So it's good also that the executive has actually directed us, the DOE and PSAC, to prepare the roadmap for the acceleration of retail competition and open access together with the relaxation of the secondary price cap in the WESM. So as we liberate more consumers to negotiate on their own, then the level of the cap will be eased up or reduced. Also, at the same time, we need to study and prepare for full deregulation of the sector, meaning almost all consumers will be moving to the contestable market, and prepare safety nets. In other jurisdictions that are fully deregulated, there are safety nets for consumers that really cannot afford to pay the prices that are set in the market. Maybe most of us in the room, a 5 peso increase per kilowatt hour on a monthly basis is not, it doesn't hurt your pockets. But there are some people where that increase will mean a disconnection of service. And they are the ones actually that need protection ahead of when we liberate the market or when we allow that full contestability to come in. At the same time, because we will be freed up from reviewing and approving power supply agreements, we have more time to enforce competition rules. and we have more resources to enforce competition rules and address the high concentration that is currently seen in the market today. On the transmission and distribution side, we continue to focus on accountability of regulated entities by completing the reset in one shape or form. We will need to update those rates. But at the same time, we are also in the Commission open to revisiting the suitableness of the methodology that's currently being used. I think some of the people in the room are familiar that from the return on rate-based methodology, the Commission shifted to performance-based rate methodology quite quickly. And one thing that I ask, ako na lang po ito, wag nyo na i-quote yung Commission. One thing that I ask is really, was there a readiness test that was performed before that shift to PBR was done? Is the industry ready? Is the regulator ready to conduct PBR after decades and decades of RORB? Are our staff equipped to do this PBR, or are they just going to rely on consultants feeding everything to the Commission, which is so far what has been happening? So we are open to revisiting that methodology and seeing what we are really suited for. Finally, just not to end on a grim note, the future is bright because we are moving towards contestability, and so far, even if there is only a 4% uptake on the contestable market, like out of the 100%, for example, eligible customers, only 40% have so far shifted. We have seen very promising fruits of competition and relation to affordability. So while we do not see yet that direct link in the generation wholesale, in the supply sector, we already see that link, where in 2023 to the first half of 2024, the average price has only been, in the supply rate, has only been 5.49 pesos per kilowatt hour. That resulted to 46 billion pesos in savings for our contestable customers. While this group is also highly concentrated, and we are also working on that, at least we see fruits. At least we see not just sweet fruits, not just bitter fruits, but sweet fruits so far of the contestable market. So let me end by saying that, or going back to what I was saying earlier, that we're not alone in this. This is happening in other parts of the world. And one thing that we have done is to look at the regulatory responses of other regulators. Anyway, ours is sometimes or feels like a lonely plight. Only other regulators will understand what we're going through. So we look at how they respond to challenges. And I like this quote from the Australian regulator that was shared a couple of weeks ago in the Australian Energy Week, where she said that, like so often in this extraordinary period we find ourselves working through, the answer to our problem must be innovation. To paraphrase Albert Einstein, we won't solve new challenges with old ideas. It might sound strange from a statutory authority like also ERC, but innovation, and also the court, not even the ERC, but also the court, but innovation and even disruption are very much what we have in mind when we put our thinking to new frameworks for the energy transition. We're all working at the intersection of two enormous revolutions, environmental and technological. In times like this, these agility and courage count for a lot, and that is hard. But one of my personal mottos, and na-convert niya ako na motto ko na rin siya, comes from the old movie Ben-Hur. To rise, you must do difficult things. I trust that everyone in this room, you have all risen to the top of your whatever ladder that you are in. So I'm sure you are used to doing difficult things. So my invitation is for us to confront these difficult issues this afternoon and hopefully find more solutions for the benefit of our people. Maraming salamat po and looking forward to the conversation.